Hello and welcome everyone. Another Sunday episode, the last one before I go to Peru. Missed last week due to the farmers market, which was very enjoyable, so hopefully we'll do that more often. But today, it's kind of a loose Q&A and mostly I've lost motivation to make videos. Happens from time to time. Usually there's a lot going on in business and travel and all of these things, and I know I've got great videos coming up to film, and so it's hard to get behind the wheel and go, okay, well let's ramp up. And so today I asked for some questions that maybe I haven't covered a ton in the past. Because you see the standard, what's the best heater for a 20-gallon? What do I put in my 5-gallon tank? That stuff we've done to death. And so I thought today we'd start out with some questions that maybe either are new to myself or things I haven't thought about in depth. One of them was, what are some household items that could be used in our aquariums? And I think I don't think there is a whole forum thread dedicated to this on the forum of nearly anything, like this water bottle right here. This is a ghost knife cave. If you look at the Lee's product, basically a clear housing for a ghost knife, this would do the same thing. So there is thousands of things that are applicable, and I think the bigger overall conversation is probably, what couldn't we use, and that's more of, let's avoid some chemicals and things that we do that we think is okay but might not be okay. And that would be like one example would be magic erasers, right? So magic erasers are great. It's a little white pad. I don't have any in here apparently, but a little white pad. They can be used to clean your any surface really, like walls and stuff that's considered to be maybe difficult to clean, right? You don't want to scratch it, that kind of stuff, glass, it does everything, right? Now that product would be safe if there was no perfumes and things like that help it sell, right? And so the ones that we sell at Aquariumcoop are basically just that. They're the same melamine pad without the scents. Now, over the course of, let's say, the last, 10 years or something, magic erasers have released non-scented ones and things like that. And so you can still buy those at a grocery store, right? Now, part of, I think, the hobby in general and the fear, I guess it's actually, I would say almost like fear-mongering. We see it in our everyday lives, right? Like this news and media outlets and all that. And we, what do I want to say here? Like pick up on that stuff in our daily lives, and then we subconsciously mimic it. And so, there's a lot of, I wouldn't do that because this could happen, right? And so, I would say you could totally go to this, your local grocery store, you could buy those things, and maybe they're a slightly better deal than us. I don't know. I actually don't know the current price of them, right? But then you'd have people that push back and say, but if you buy the wrong ones, you're going to kill everything. And that, while it was a true statement, it leads to a lot of uneasiness with just the product in general, and so then people will buy from us, which is good for us, right? And I think people need to take that into consideration. Like, there definitely are things in my life where I would rather, let's say, a professional or know I'm buying the right product or something like that for more money because my, let's say, anxiety or my mind will be put at ease while buying that product, which is beneficial to me, right? Even though it's the same product, if I know, like, there's no chance basically for us that scented ones are going to get shipped out. We buy like a cargo container of them at a time. We might open the cargo container and be like, whoa, this smells like lavender, and we know that would be horrible and we wouldn't be able to sell any of those, right? Whereas, possibly at a factory, there could be a mix-up, 1 in a million chance, that type of thing. So I don't think that there's many products that would make, well, that's not going to sound right. I think there's a lot of products in the world that will do just fine in aquariums, but it takes everyone to have that leap of faith, right? So you have an ornament, you have a decoration, not a decoration, like a plant pot or something like that, and there could be a glaze on it, and you don't know, is this glaze aquarium safe or isn't it? One time I knew a guy, all his fish died because of the glaze on the pot. You won't know that until you try it. And so we're all kind of a crowdsourced system here where we're all relying like, oh, that's what makes YouTubers work, right? If I go and I buy this pot that looks cool and maybe it's painted and glazed and all that and it works just fine, now everyone knows, okay, I could buy that same pot at this link and have success also. But someone out there has to do the guinea pig testing, and that's a lot of my job, or a lot of you home hobbyists. You do it all the time. We see it so often, but it doesn't. The information doesn't travel out there because there's still always that like, well, what if I buy the wrong one? And so, there's so many potential issues and not a lot of upside, right? So if I was to spend more time, more episodes, more airtime, whatever it is, talking about Easter grass, right? How it's a great spawning material for a lot of egg scattering fish, or even just Livebearers and things like that. And for maybe those out of country, or if you don't know what Easter grass is, it's the plastic stringy stuff you see in an Easter basket in America during April, right? And that stuff, pretty cheap when it's not even on sale, but then like the day after Easter, it's dang near free. Like you get a whole bushel of it for 20 cents or something. And that just, it's kind of like having fake Java moss, right? You can get it in a billion different colors, so that's sometimes beneficial, sometimes not. But there's always the caveat of, I'm sure there's Easter grass out there that was made by something different, or this Easter grass is covered in glitter, or what, like, I've never seen it, but I'm sure it's out there if someone's marketing like, oh, it's more sparkly, this is Princess Easter grass, or this is, sparkle green slime Easter grass, whatever it's going to be. And so we still have to take our aquarist head and mindset to it and go, well, that's a little different, or that's a little, unsafe, and test it though, because it might be, maybe it's just different plastic flakes embedded in the Easter grass, right? Or there's literally the next bin over is the normal Easter grass. But I think virtually everything can be used. And why I think I say that is, like, this Diet Coke can in the wild is a home, right? And so, recently in a video where Randy went with wild fish tanks to collect fish in Florida, there was like some kind of aluminum can. I don't remember if it was like a beer can, a soda can, whatever it was, right? And I believe there was like fish or crayfish or something in it, and they poured it into the net, and then they put it back down, and like a bunch of people are like, how dare you, right? I can totally see that mentality of like, hey, that's garbage, that's not good for the environment and all of that. But in that micro ecosystem, like let's say that 10-foot square or whatever, or however big a crayfish is going to roam, what if like there was other crayfish and other fish that relied on that can to not be eaten by birds and other big fish and things like that? So it's this weird dichotomy of, the topic at hand of like, is that good or bad for the environment? I actually think probably an aluminum can in most of our tanks, the way we change water, probably wouldn't have enough of a negative impact to actually be a problem. In the environment, obviously, in totality of like massive amounts, that's bad. But also in that very short, or not short, but in that smaller space, that can could actually be a benefit, right? And we see some of that, like if we're restoring coral habitats. Not that we're using aluminum cans, but we might be making artificial structures to help it build back. And one could make a case like, hey, that pop can or that beer can or whatever was actually serving as an important role for this thing. It could also kill the next thing that goes into it. But the point being, almost everything could be used in an aquarium in some way to replace something else. And, examples of that, I've seen a fish store, very old school. It was definitely, it was literally in an alley, hole in the wall. No, it wasn't a literal hole in the wall, but, use that descriptor. It kind of makes sense. And instead of like bio rings, they used gym socks. And it's because everything can grow bacteria, whether it's a beard hair, whether it's a pop can, whether it's a bio ring, whether it's a pad, whether it's a gym sock. Everything will grow bacteria. It's all surfaces. And so the gym socks, on one hand, make no sense at all, and on the other hand, make great sense, right? How far off is a gym sock? Let's say it's like a tube sock, right? How far off is that from like a sponge pad? Not that much. I mean, there's different porosity there, but in principle, kind of fairly similar. And so when you take that sock out and you go to the sink and you rinse it and you clean it and all that, yeah, that works pretty good. Now imagine that you had an entire fish store, and let's say you wanted to service all the filters. If you could take out all of the gym socks and run them through a washing machine, you don't even have to use like chlorine or soap or anything, but it would really get them clean. Then you could either A, put them back in, or B, let's say you had another barrel of gym socks that were already wet and seeded with bacteria, and you just plop those in. It probably works so long as you're not removing all of the biological material out of the filters and things like that. And in one way, this is incredibly more efficient money-wise and time-wise for the store. It's horrible marketing. Like, he didn't sell socks, so people weren't buying socks. But from an operational standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. Now, my old boss, when I worked at Conway Tropical Fish, his own personal fish room at home, he ran similar. He had a washing machine dedicated to sponge filters, and every aquarium that he ran, which was, I don't know, it was like 100 or something of them, it was quite a few. Every one of them had 2 sponge filters in it. And what they would do is, like, I don't know, once every 3 months or 6 months, whatever the increment of time was, they would go remove the sponge from one of the 2 in each aquarium. So it was like 100 sponge filters at a time. They would remove one, and they would run that through the washing machine with just, hot water or whatever, and let it spin cycle and dry them. Then they go back into the aquariums. Now, in this setup, there was some redundancy in that there was 2 sponge filters on each, and then also there was a giant, well, I say giant because it is, but a 125-gallon sump filled with kind of bio balls and bio rings, and there was a lot of bacteria there, and all of the aquariums circulated into that. Now, so if you remove one sponge, that wasn't the majority of the bacteria, and there probably needs to be more videos about that. And part of the problem is sometimes people ask me to speak on topics that I don't know how I would prove. I can know it, but I don't know that I can explain it in a way and prove it to not just be like, this guy's crazy. But with bacteria, it's going to coat every surface. So the bottom glass, the side glass, the decorations, right? The piece of fish poop that's laying there, bacteria is going to grow on that. And so these 2 sponges, that's also going to be, but then the pipe that runs all the way to the sump with all these tanks, that's going to be filled with bacteria. Your canister hoses, everything that's wet grows bacteria. Now, if you do a big water change and there's only this much water left, all the bacteria that's on the glass dies off, it'll come back. Same thing with a sponge filter. So the totality of the bacteria, when you're looking at one sponge filter, it might have been 10% of the bacteria, right? But in this application for his fish room and maybe your fish tank, it was actually serving as, yes, 10% of the biological, but then it might have been 50% of the mechanical. And that just means that it's actually sucking up fish poop and particles and polishing the water. And so that was very beneficial when you kind of take it out with a bag or a pitcher and you go and you put that in your dedicated washing machine and you get all that gunk out, and then you would put it back in. And what he found was it was actually less wear and tear on the sponges instead of like trying to wring them out one by one. He had it just like I was starting to develop it, was like some carpal tunnel from squeezing sponges. If you do a lot of them very often, this motion will start creating some problems for you. But he also found that it actually didn't break the sponge down as much. The kind of the sloshing motion and then the spinning motion wasn't as hard on the sponge. So he actually got a little bit longer out of them. Now, I still think he didn't get as long as a hobbyist would. Like maybe the hobbyist cleans it, once every 3 or 6 months. And if he's doing it every month, like it's still 3 to 6 times more cleanings. But he did elongate the use of that product out of it. So, yeah. And again, that's a household product that got used in the aquarium, right? A washing machine, gym socks. all of these things have applications, and it's down to us on what is our budget, what will let us sleep at night, what are we proud of. One crazy idea is someone else's genius, right? Like, wow, I never thought to do that. And we see it, with Dean doing products, right? Like, a lot of times there'll be people that will say like, well, I've been doing that for 50 years. Like, well, yeah, a lot of us have too. And then there's a lot of people I've never seen like, oh yeah, we're bending PVC. And there's the whole like, why wouldn't you just buy a Python? Like, yes, why wouldn't you just give me your money and buy a Python? Please do. That keeps us running. That's great. But there's also lots of technique that we teach in these videos that are used in other applications, right? So if we're making a Python hook, that's the same technology we use to make custom auto water change lines and feeder lines and bend plastic over the rim with the rigid tubing to run airline behind a background. And so these skills, it's not always like, here's how you make one specific product. It's mostly, here's how you're going to do something that we're going to show you today, and then how do you apply that to your hobby? So if we were to build the miniature ponds that we did a few weeks back, Dean and I could have a conversation and be like, oh, I totally get what you're doing. Yeah, that makes sense. I've done something like that before, and maybe, so in applications I've done, I've used that same setup to plumb 2 sumps together under the 800 gallon. You guys have seen that in previous videos of like, yeah, bulkhead, let the water pass through. And then he's using an airlift system, right? And that's kind of like an undergravel filter, but also it shows you basically how you would build a return if you had a sump or anything like that in your aquarium, or you needed to DIY your own return for a canister filter. Let's say you found one cheap somewhere, it was missing some of the hoses and the intake and the output. You now could go, hey, I remember they kind of did that union, that kind of works, that disconnect valve, okay? And then they had that piece that came over. I could replicate that. And then in other videos you've seen us make, spray bars and intakes. We showed you how to make an intake in that little pond. And so it's not always, I don't think this is a good use of my time and resource to build this exact project. And more so should be, hey, I'm learning a skill, and maybe you already know that skill, but this is a skill, but where can I apply it in my hobby? You may never build one of those, but you might be building something, it's the same way if you were going to build, for instance, people have asked us to make the video a bunch of times, and I just never have, but an automatic fry separating system, right? So if you had like a sponge divider or a glass divider, some way to separate an aquarium into 2 parts, you then, let's say with like Livebearer fry, right? Something that goes to the bottom where a lot of other fry go to the top, like rainbows and tetras and that kind of stuff. But let's say Livebearer fry, it works easy for them. They have babies, and babies are going to seek cover, right? And so if you put like a little pile of rocks or, some bigger stones, there's lots of crevices, but maybe not big enough for adults to get down there. But the fry will naturally gravitate towards the cover. Now, if you have that airlift system, just kind of like we did, where it had like an open-ended bottom and an air stone that dumped out on the other side of the aquarium, right? That's going to suck up babies and put them on the other side where there's not adults, right? And if you have a piece of sponge, right, that also becomes the filter now, because it has to suck up water. And when you pump water over here, it forces water back through. And so now you've turned your sponge filter into a fry suction system that will place it on the other side. Now it also has the other benefit of it usually puts all of the fish poop and the debris on one side of the tank also. So you can start applying different techniques and methodologies to stuff that has no real relation to it, but will be applicable in your hobby. And there's so many things you can do with that. That's also so that same airlift system, right, that we made a pond with, is the same way you make an underwater waterfall with sand. So instead of airlifting water, there's ways to do it where you can airlift sand, or you start using like a pump to do it. It's really the airlift system. That's the easier way of saying really we're using a Venturi effect, and that is like with something moving, it pulls something with it. And so you can do that with water or air. You see the reverse of that with power heads, where power heads are pushing water, and then you have one tube that goes up to air and it sucks in air, and you get that psh, 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 psh. That's the same system in reverse. And so a lot of these things that are seemingly really simple videos are teaching some pretty actually advanced concepts. Now we don't sit there and spend an hour going, here's the fluid dynamics, and then there's lots of papers that I've read and I forget 80% of what I read, but like diameter size of the tube matters a lot in comparison to the amount of air and the size of bubble, or the amount of water moving with the amount of suction it's going to create. There's all of these things, you know, from as simple as I build the same thing, but I use elbows instead of bending the pipe. Yes, you can do that for sure, but each bend reduces, or not each bend, each like 90-degree angle or even 45s, each corner you put in there will have drag basically. And so by creating a pipe that is nice and smooth, you can actually get it to go pretty quickly. And in fact, in saltwater tanks, a lot of times, if you bend it just right, the plastic, you can make an accelerator, right? If you've ever seen one of those accelerators, you basically put it on the return of a pump from a sump or a canister filter, and it makes the water go faster. And that doesn't seem like it should be possible, but it's no different than we have some pressure on a hose in our garden. You put your thumb over half of it, guess what? It sprays further, right? It's actually the same or the less amount of water, but it would go further. In our aquarium, that might stir it up more or create more current. And so there's lots of these little concepts and things we can do with plenty of research and science behind it that we don't really need to know. We just need to know, hey, I do this. You know, a lot of us probably don't understand the physics and everything, you know, head pressure and all of that, of like you put your thumb over the end of the hose, changes the way water works. I know that it does that. I don't know that I could explain it, and I don't think I could explain the science of why and what it's doing internally in the hose, and learning about 50-foot hose versus 25-foot hose versus 100-foot hose. All of those things matter, but they don't matter in enough to actually change the way we garden most times, or water our garden. And the same thing is going to be in your aquarium of that. There are so many things that you could utilize, you know, but one, does it make sense? Two, you just got to try it. And three, you don't necessarily have to understand it. I mean, right here I have a GoPro housing, right? And you would think, like, how could you ever use this in an aquarium? Very limited. I don't know that I could. Well, it's actually not waterproof for a GoPro, but I'm talking like not using it as a GoPro. Like right here, there's a piece of sponge, right? This sponge is not really any different than other fine sponge filters. Now, if this was the intake on a tiny little fountain pump, maybe in your Fluval Flex or your Fluval 5 Spec, or the water return is going way too fast on your betta tank, you can probably adapt this to be on the output. And now on the output, it's now diffusing the water that comes out. Like, you know, these are just things on my desk. There's a million things you could use. And so the possibilities are endless. Now, could this be treated with flame retardant? It certainly could. It could kill everything. It smells okay, so that's the first test, to like, it doesn't smell too chemically. But maybe you soak it in water over on the side to see if any oil develops on the surface of the water. And maybe you have, you know, a fish room like mine. You can go, okay, I've got a billion guppies. Maybe I'll put one guppy in this bowl over here with this thing and see how that goes. Seems to be fine. Then you might know. Like, obviously this would be a horrible example because it's like $100 little gadget that's, you know, makes audio sound better. But if you happen to have a bunch of these around for whatever reason, or just something like that, nearly anything can be used. And there's always things to consider, like, oh, what if, you know, the metal leaches in? Yeah, you might have to up water changes and you know, but there are benefits. Or, you know, if you go way back in the Wayback Machine for planted aquariums, some of it was putting nails. You take a nail, you put it in the substrate, it oxidizes, produces iron for the plants. Like, these things that seemingly right now, a lot of new hobbies would be mortified if that was to fall into their aquarium. And then we find out a while ago we were putting those in intentionally. And so I think there's a lot of things we could be doing, but does it make sense? Like right now, it might actually be harder for me to find a nail to put in my aquarium than a root tab, because I could order it on my website. I probably have some here. I probably don't have nails. I've got screws, But I don't know that, I guess that's the problem we run into with the home hobbyist application. I might have not 10,000, but 2,000 screws of drywall screws, stainless steel screws, different screws for different applications that we've used. I don't think I have a single nail though. And so screws can be made up of different things. Some might be galvanized, some might be, stainless, some might be just coated with the black coating like a drywall screw, and that might not be directly applicable to our aquarium and adding basically rust and iron. And so that's where I think we get caught up, and you have to do some experiments like, oh, maybe I got to put each one of those screws into, like a bucket of water and just kind of see what they do over time. And, it's not like you put a nail in and then overnight you're like, oh, I have iron. It takes, time for it to start to degrade. So, and as you get that wisdom and it passes from person to person to person, it can be useful, So, yes, I'm not opposed to using home stuff. Know that there's always some risk. Know that there's always, a chance for something to be drastically different. A penny nail from 20 years ago is probably not like a penny nail from, not that it would be a penny nail really, but like a nail today. And so you got to do experimenting. But that's the fun in the hobby for me, is experimenting. All right. I want to address this question real quick. Where'd it go? So Paul Martin said, would the purchase of ATI Sponges Company be a wise investment, or has the China influx put a clamp on ATI? So I think there's always, as long as I've been in the hobby, I think there's always been a prevalence of externally sourced products, whether that's China, Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan, like wherever it's made, right? In the United States market. Maybe not 60 years ago, right? But definitely since I've been in the hobby, in the last, 15, 20-ish years at that point. Now, ATI has been around a long time. And if you had asked me this question probably 3 years ago when when the company was for sale, and it might still be for sale, I don't know. And we were looking for sponge filters and all of that, and how could we make our own, and we were having trouble sourcing them, really, is the problem. And back then, we definitely looked into it, but what we had run into was you had to buy the entire company, and I think at the time it was like $160,000, I think. I could be misremembering. Maybe it was $260,000. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head anymore. But it was more money than we had to be throwing around. But even if we had the money, the other problem was this company was based, I think, in Georgia, and it had employees, and it had a facility that you'd have to rent, and there's all these other costs that came with it. And so we weren't really looking to start up another business, because that's what it would be, right? Is all of a sudden you have to manage employees, and you have payroll, and you have all the safety equipment and walkthroughs and inspections and chemicals to source and all of that. So we'd have to do all of that to produce these sponge filters, right? And at the time, the sponge filters, in my opinion, were having problems, and they had cracked bases, and some of the plastic, I think, had changed, and there was some problems there. And Owen says, you never address my name when you answer my questions. I don't know that I've answered your question. But anyway, so 3 years ago, we didn't see value. Now, if we had been maybe at one state over, or East Coast, or a different spot, maybe it would have made sense. But I don't think that outsourced sponge filters have made them obsolete. I think there's a lot of benefits, especially right now. Like right now, there could be a lot of benefits to having locally sourced sponge filters. If we had the option, which we don't currently, but if we did, if we could have the same Aquariumcoop sponge filter made in America, we would do that. And part of it is controlling kind of the source and being closer to it and faster turnaround times. We'd have to stock less. And part of it is just like, it's just good to, we try to employ as many people as we can, as close to home as we can. And sometimes there's not that option. But, there's a massive shift going on in the economy right now that we're all a part of. It's affecting us a little bit, and we might have our eyes on maybe COVID or unemployment or other things. But the biggest thing that I can see that's glaring to me is cargo containers, which you guys have heard me talk about for months, and it's not getting better. It's continually getting worse. And so much so that 2 years ago, a 40-foot cargo container, the shipping on it was $1,500. Now, we put a container of sponge filters, actually, last week on the water. And that cost is now $18,000, right? So more than 10x the cost in shipping. 100%, that's going to have an effect on your guys' buy price. It's not just like, well, it was $1,500, now it's $1,800. No, it's $18,000 and that's a huge thing. Now, that is going to translate into everything we see in life. There's pretty much every product on the planet. Well, I think I was doing research on this because I become increasingly more concerned and I want to become more educated. And I believe it's something like 80% of products in the world, not just for like the US, just like in the world, relies on something made that has to be shipped by a cargo container. So it could be, for instance, like let's say it's this GoPro thing again, right? It could be, let's say this plastic piece is all made in America, but it could be the sponge comes from China, right? And so like 80% of everything, and not just in the US, it could be UK, other countries, a lot of stuff is assembled and it requires people that specialize in different things, right? And so with knowing that the price is going up on everything, I can't help but think of what that does at the very lowest levels. If you want to eat teriyaki food tomorrow, right? And let's say chopsticks, like kind of the disposable chopsticks, are made in, let's say, Vietnam. I don't know where they're made. They're probably sourced in probably a lot of different countries. But if that price for a cargo container of those goes up, let's say it was $10,000 to order a cargo container of chopsticks. I have no idea. It could be $100,000. But now it's $28,000, up from $11,500. That's going to increase the price, and that'll end up increasing the price in food, right? And if the price of food increases, then job wages increase. And so there's a lot of things that go on. And then there's just shortages right now. We have new products that you guys desperately would want that are sitting that can't be produced. Like we've done all the testing, right? And it's ready to go, except we can't buy the electronic boards. They just can't be bought right now. And so something that we would have launched probably 4 months ago, we might be another 4 months, year, 2 years out. We don't know when. No one knows when that will right itself. And you guys, like me, a lot of times I just have my head in the sand. I focus on, the stuff I have influence over, and that would be my fish, my dogs, my family, my little business, right? But the fact that, Germany flooded, you've got floods and the tsunami hitting Shanghai. And if you haven't seen it, look for the footage of where like the tsunami in the water hits the port and you watch all the cargo containers just get destroyed. Well, the cargo in them get destroyed and all of that. And just knowing that that's one of the larger ports in the world, and economists and other people studying it think we're a couple years out probably from actually recovering. And so part of it is, I see this coming. I want to buy more stock so that we don't run out for you guys, because here I am for the last 5 years saying, how do companies run out of products? They need to manage the resources better and all that. So I have to be on the other side of that going, okay, let's make sure we don't run out of sponge filters. Let's make sure we don't run out of anything with our name on it. And so like at my house here, I have cargo containers on the property that we store product in, right? And so maybe it's sponge filters, maybe it's, other stuff like that. It's not temperature sensitive or anything like that. And we just need to put more cargo containers in to store more because there's more supply chain interruption. Well, now that same cargo container that was $3,000, because that's how much it cost me to buy a cargo container last year, $3,000. That same cargo container, well, that's not true. A worse shaped cargo container is now $7,000, and there's no guarantee to buy it. So last year when I was buying during, like COVID, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds available on their like lot or whatever to buy because the economy, like stuff moving around, slowed down. Now, when I called the same company, they had 5, but they couldn't even guarantee that they would be there by the time the phone call ended. Like it was so short, that so yeah, it right now, circling back, if I was to own a sponge manufacturing company in Georgia and we had it all fully operational and worked out all the kinks and were able to abide by all the local laws that we wouldn't know about yet and all of those things, it would be very beneficial to have, our own sponge manufacturer. I think if there was ever a time for ATI to have a resurgence, it would be now. Part of the problem is back when we were looking at ATI and that kind of stuff, we didn't get far enough in the process to see like what were the production costs. We just knew what we paid, and what we were paying for sponge filters is more than what we sell them for now. So you got to kind of think about that of like, wait, so you would pay, if we retail them at $7, we were paying $7.50 for them. And so that's why if you've been a fan of the co-op for a long time purchasing from us, you know that sponge filters were like $15. And we've been able to bring that price down quite a bit. Now, was that, just too many people in the chain touching it, or was that production costs were much higher? I don't know. So I can't know that answer, but I do think there still is plenty of room for American-made products and things like that. I think you got to be very nimble and you got to be very, business savvy to compete with a worldwide market. There's no doubt that, Aquariumcoop does okay in the United States, but if I start trying to compete in the world, now there's so many more competitors. It's not an easy landscape for anything. It's almost worth building a second warehouse to store those goods. I have contractors I work with every week. We had a meeting last week of what would it take, what's the timeline to build a steel building or a wood building, what are the costs? And really it's the permits. The permits right now are 6 to 8 months out. So we can't start construction for 6 to 8 months. That's part of the problem we have right now. So even though it would be more expensive and all that, 6 to 8 months before we could start building. Meanwhile, we need that product, and so much so we're trying to feather things, right? That those sponge filters, I actually tried to delay them by a month, so they're going to land basically end of September. And I said, hey, if we could get them to land at the the middle of October or early November, that'd be a lot better. We'd have hopefully source some cargo containers and get landing them in a little bit better situation. Just the cost of rescheduling a cargo container was $1,800, which that's crazy to me to think about that. It now costs more to say, hey, could you just cancel the reservation on that cargo container and we'll take it in a month from today as opposed to today. That now costs more than it did to ship it across the world. So that just shows like how tight and how stressful that infrastructure system is right now. And there's plenty more to go on with semi trucks and trains and all of that. And it's I find it fascinating. But I don't think anyone can really see, I don't think the human brain is complex enough to see the implications of, chopsticks being more expensive. And then, because you always have the human element of that's exactly why I don't use chopsticks, someone says. They're using reusable. Yes, definitely. And then, if public mindset changes and now we're selling way more reusable chopsticks or way more forks or way more whatever, right? there's all these things that at a certain point, you can figure out 90%, there's 10% unknown in like everything of like who we couldn't have guessed or forecasted that. So, Corey, have you noticed any different colored females popping up with Vienna guppies? I have some golden gray females with red orange colored fins popping up. Yeah, definitely. That's going to happen with essentially everything you'll ever breed from like a Livebearer. I mean, it happens in other fish too, but yes, there's always going to be some, and the more you let those continually breed, the more that's going to be prevalent. And so, I colony breed lots of things, and so I'm always, if I see something I don't like, and it's not that I don't like it, but it's different and it won't continue the color pattern and stuff I want, I usually move it to a different aquarium. And so that's why I've kind of got the assorted guppies. Sometimes you find something that's really cool, and you actually move that aside because you want to breed it, and it's better, or not better, but cool enough that you want both, right? And so that's how a lot of strains are actually made and cultivated and things like that. Varshil has asked in comments and quite a few times in chat here, is it possible to breed midnight rams using regular German blue rams or wild rams? Yes, it totally is. If you have like 40 years of your life, you'll be able to do that. Yeah, and 40 years is obviously hyperbole, right? But I think it took the people that were doing in Israel like 16 years, right? It took them 12 to get pretty good, and then from there they got them better. And even right now, I think Dean's up to like 25% of them come out as a midnight black ram, basically. And so I never want to re-engineer the wheel when it comes to a fish, because usually an insane amount of work has been done to get there. And then do I think there'll be a benefit to that? Sometimes there are. Sometimes maybe things went wrong. They've gone so wrong genetically. They've gotten so weak. And maybe it's super popular and it would be worth it. Whereas like a midnight ram, I do not think it's worth it. It is not. It'll never, well, I can't say never, but based on our sales and what we see, it would never be as popular as a normal German blue ram. It doesn't pass the grandma test. And the grandma test is just a random hobbyist or a random person looking at fish. Will they look at that and go, that's amazing? They don't. Just like with a red really shrimp, which is a cherry shrimp with kind of some clear sections in it. That same grandma test or the random hobbyist test, they just say, what's wrong with that one? So that's why it will never, it's not never, it would take an insane amount of marketing to convince people that this thing is better than that version, right? It would be like taking a nice red sports car and convincing people that the random missing paint, if you just like threw paint at the car, that's more sought after than a nice paint job. Some people like it because it's so different, right? Of like, oh, this is unique and all that, but most people would just want a perfect paint job. And I think that is with fish too. So if it doesn't pass the grandma test, and insert whatever, person that's with the hobbyist, so whether that's brother, sister, wife, husband, doesn't matter, grandma, uncle, you've got someone who loves aquatics and is there shopping, and then they drug some family member or friend with them. If you ask them, who doesn't own an aquarium, what they like better, that is the one that always sells way more. Now, obviously, you could have one person that's like, all I like blackfish, that's it. But if you were to do that over a group of like 20 people, it'll give you the answer of like, okay, this is very broad appeal, this is what I should be breeding. And in a store, you see that magnified so much because of, you might have 100 people come to the store, and you can watch everyone, and they take a look at a specific, like, oh, these red platies look really good. And like, okay, that is the human. I got like a fly on me or a little bug. The human is just attracted to that setup the way it is. So, yeah. Where like I have no desire to keep black rams at all. Like I don't think I prefer, you know, if I was choosing a ram to keep, it would be the electric blue ones. I think look pretty neat, and I also like gold rams a lot. German blue rams are good too. You know, I don't know, you know, which one I would put as the actual best, but yeah, all of those for me are just straight up above the midnight ones. And in fact, even long fin versions are above that for me personally. If you're acclimating one species at a time, which should come first out of Neo Shrimp, Pleco, and Chili Rasboras? Are you talking about like adding to a tank like you have all three of these in three different buckets, or as in you're putting an aquarium together and over the next month you're going to add these? If that was the case, I'd probably start with the Chili Rasboras, and then at some point I would just add the Neo Shrimp and the Pleco. I'd probably add the Pleco last. Like, it wouldn't really matter, but I'd want to build up basically fish poop and things like that for the shrimp. If it's talking about actually acclimating them like all at the same time, I don't think there's any tangible difference. Like if you have 3 buckets and they're all going in the next half an hour, I don't think there's a tangible difference to what order they go in at that point. For those, like if you were, you know, no, I can't. I was like maybe African. I can't even think of for the African cichlids, because the only time would be, oh, these are big enough they would eat these. If you're in that situation, they probably shouldn't be living in the same aquarium. All right. My bi-weekly interview reminder from Rico Stan. I almost emailed you yesterday, which almost is worth nothing. I acknowledge that. But I saw you on, what, 503 Aquatics? That yesterday? I think so. And I was like, yeah, I really need to set something up. And my calendar, you know, part of it, you know, my kind of burnout with videos and all that, I'm just like super in the swamp with business stuff where we're planning events and we've got all this stuff kind of going on, and you know, monitoring, you know, Ginger's talking about the heat wave and magic. Like we've been doing amazing this year in terms of shipping and heat and all of that. We've done really well. I think, you know, it's kind of fun to see, you know, maybe a struggle last year or the year before, like those culmination of years where those are the most pressing issues. Being that we developed the algorithm, we developed better packing materials, and we've done all of these things, we now see the fruits of that labor where it's like, oh, I remember losing that summer to that problem, you know, and it's the summer, and then we worked on it there and there and there. Yeah, it's fun to see that, like, you know, because there's always another problem, right? Like $18,000 cargo containers, and then every once in a while you get a glimpse of, man, that used to be the struggle. Like, oh, it's amazing, that's doing so well now. So events. What do I know that we're doing? So it's not officially on our calendar yet, but we've been designing the flyers and all of that. Let me move over here. So officially, because we bought banquet tickets and reserve spots and things like that, we're going to the American Livebearer Association convention in Coral Springs, Florida, October 21st to the 24th. So the things that I'm excited to do, this was the first meeting, or not meeting, club event is probably convention. The first convention I ever went to was by the Gold Coast Aquarium Society in Florida, and it was the Livebearer event. And being a novice to this, it was amazing then, and now that I've been to a bunch, I know that it was extra amazing because the things you get to do outside of it, right? So this is a longer convention. So even though the actual convention, like speakers and all that stuff, is happening just on those 2 days, the days before, let's see if I can show you here. So like field trips visiting fish farms, right? Outdoor Fish Store, Watley Hatchery. I believe this might be Fan, actually, this picture right here. So Florida Aquatic Nursery. So it's fun to see, like, this might be Amazon or Melon Swords or something like that, and just seeing the way different plants are grown. But all of this, so that's Thursday. So the day before, right? Thursday. $35, and these are always limited, right? So they rent like a couple of vans or whatever they're going to do, and maybe you'll be sitting in our van, or maybe you'll be in a different van. Who knows? Like, this is a group event. We all go, and I've been to the outdoor fish store. I've been to Watley's. I've been to Watley's hatchery, and that'll be another fun visit. But you get to see all these things in person, so that's like a fun day event. So if you come in, I recommend either coming in very early on that Thursday or the night before. And then Friday, you get to go collect fish. Now, this is where I had an absolute ton of fun when I was new to the convention scene, because I had never gone collecting, and they've got the nets, and you're just in a van, and the waterways. There's so many things out there in Florida. It's really fun. And then you can kind of figure out ways to ship them back to yourself. Usually, I don't know at this convention, but usually there's supplies and things, so you can find like breather bags, and they've got a little station to set up. You got to pay for it to send it back to yourself and buy the bags and stuff. But you also could plan a little ahead, order some online, bring some Prime with you. You can watch the video of us like keeping fish in our hotel room, because if you catch them on October 22nd and you're not flying home till like the 24th or 25th, you put those in the mail on the 22nd, they might be sitting on your doorstep before you ever got home, unless you have a spouse who can put them away. So usually you're keeping them in the hotel room with you. You crank the heat up in there, and you kind of just keep them, and then you ship them like that Sunday or that Monday. Usually you can pack them up on Sunday, and someone will get them to the post office on Monday. And then there's the actual Tropical Fish Expo. Now, this is supposed to be, it's actually going to be a bigger event. It's like combined, so it's an expo and the convention all in one. They expect about 1,000 people to attend, where like a normal ALA event is usually more like 300. And being that we're going, that number might be bigger. Hopefully, you guys, if you're local, you'll show up for sure. Maybe you've got some vacation time saved up or whatever. I can't guarantee it's gonna be a good time, but I really think it will be. Then there's a banquet, which it's kind of a very formal thing. I don't know how much these are. We were going to it, but it's probably $35 a plate or something. Which that's what helps fund the event. A lot of people go, that's just expensive for a meal, and it is. But also realize that renting a banquet, not a banquet hall, but like the room spaces are very expensive, and negotiating a cheaper rental rate and all of that. So it kind of all plays in of like whether or not they charge you just $200 to get in the door, or they let you kind of go, okay, well, it's 30 for this, 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 kind of take and match, mix and match, because they want to keep it as affordable as possible. So if you can't afford it, you could still attend the event and you don't have to go to the banquet. And then there's a big auction on Sunday, and that's usually pretty fun. There's lots of rare species normally. People will send fish. So there's usually the show, right, where things are getting judged and all that, and a lot of those fish will then be sold afterwards. And so you can buy some very high-end fish. Well, I say high-end, but very unique and stuff maybe you haven't seen at this auction. And some will go very expensive, some will go very cheap. You'll have local, farms and stores and hobbyists and all of that bringing stuff as well. And then I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to sneak in a members-only, so like a YouTube members-only dinner Friday night. We haven't been able to book a place or anything like that yet, but we do know we're going to this in October. So we're also doing another event, which it's not on the events calendar yet, but we're doing another event in Washington State. It's going to be above the store, the retail store, and it'll be a couple hours long, and we're going to provide like some pizza. And we might do it like a potluck. We haven't figured it all out yet. We just secured the place we're going to do it. Now we're securing the rental chairs and things like that. So we're working on that stuff. And then we're figuring out what are we doing for the members, right? So again, if you're a YouTube member and you come to this event, we're thinking maybe it's a goodie bag, or what are we going to do for that added benefit? Like, anyone can come to this. It's free. Like, our event will be free. Anyone can show up, hang out. Dean and I, Zenzo will be there. We don't know exactly what else is going on. We don't know what the format looks like yet. We've talked about maybe a rare fish auction or something. We don't know what we're quite doing yet and exactly how long it'll last, but it'll be the date on that, I believe. Let me look at a calendar real quick. Zenzo might be typing it in the chat right now, but I believe on my calendar that will be That will be October 2nd. Saturday, October 2nd is the retail store kind of meetup and all of that. And I guess that segues into my next thing that I was going to rant about. And that is, I'm going to be doing everything in my power, I guess, to dissuade, I guess is the right word, dissuade event organizers from using is not the right word, having YouTubers speak as the speakers. So my opinion is that someone who's a YouTuber has the ability to film a video every day and get it to you guys. You guys can consume it easily, usually for very cheap or free, right? And then there's a lot of other people who don't have that platform that have great knowledge. And the best example of this would be Dean, that you guys already know. Like, there's other great examples, but Dean is a guy who just is probably never gonna do his own videos. He's a very busy person. He's very engaged with his fish room and all of that, right? And so even though he can put on a great presentation, he can teach, he can do all this, he doesn't find the time to do it because there's other things in his life going on. So, highlighting someone like him. Now, he's in my videos enough that I also don't think he should be a speaker. But, I'm seeing a trend with lots of events lately where it's just majority of YouTube speakers. And I feel like, in my personal opinion, I know they bring people to a show. I don't dispute that, but I think it's a lazy way of content planning. And so it's like, well, let's double down. Let's use, let's work with YouTubers to say, hey, I'm going to this event. If you want to meet me, I'm going to be there, all of that. But then let's bring in other people to give presentations that don't normally give presentations. And so like at the ALA in October, right? We basically have no YouTubers here, which means we have a chance to learn. Not that we can't learn from YouTubers, but we already have that chance, right? And so, learning sex lives of Livebearer. So I guess I didn't mention that at the banquet. Usually there's a talk, and usually it's more comical and that kind of stuff, but being that this guy's got his PhD and that kind of stuff, I don't know if it'll be comical or it'll be more serious. I don't know. You got Joe Gargas with New Stuff in the Hobby. Carl Trochu, this guy I did a members only video of, and he's the one that has his fish room. It's only outside, and he makes some of the best Livebearers in the world. Let me see if I can find that for you guys. Yeah, here we go. So Carl Trochu, he is one of those people that does make his own fish. So when we were talking about how long does it take to make your own midnight rams, he makes his own fish, and that makes him have very unique stuff. This is his fish room here, where it's literally all outside when water changes or rain. He does his own as well, but and he's got photos and so this April 2012 ALA convention, that was the first one I ever went to. And so you can see here all these different fish in different tanks, and I think these are Charles Clapsaddle's mollies. See if I can get some of these. But you can just see like this fish doesn't really exist on Aquabid in the hobby. This crazy high fin swordtail, right? And this is I think he only brings like one thing in each class to compete in, and I'm not sure that I've ever seen him like not win the class he enters. But if we were to look at, I'm into Variatus platies. He's got lots of different strains. Like this one, I'm really in love with. This nice like ruby orange. And you can see down here, so he's got that ruby orange, but then it's also got this high fin. This stuff he's been working on for many, many generations. And you can just see kind of, these are just progressions. So in June 2012, some of the fish that he was working with, like this stuff's kind of crazy. This albino, hyphen, I don't even know what. And then you could just, he only went I say only, but here's 3 years later working with some different stuff. He's really into hyphen or swordtails and variatus. I'm really into variatus, so that our paths cross from that. Like, I hadn't seen this one before. That's pretty nice. Yeah, this variatus is pretty cool. Coral blue with the hyphen. But if you're a super Livebearer nerd like me, watching this guy talk about how he's actually pulling this off, and his fish room is not very large. It's like 20 tanks maybe, and he's making some of the best fish in the world. At least in America, he's winning, every time he enters pretty much, because he's doing different things and stuff that no one's seen, and so you can see how good some of this is turning into, right? So you saw it in, if this is an adult in 2017, right? You can kind of see these variations. Looking to be a pretty good fish, and a lot of people like me would really love to own that fish. You can see here's that one we were looking at, and you can see like, oh, well, that ray there didn't fully extend yet. And I say yet because he'll keep working on this stuff. And so he's got all this stuff going, but then when like these look really good. When you got all that stuff going, you learn a lot, and you can impart that wisdom. So, that's January 2017, and we were looking, at like March 2013 or whatever we were looking at. So 4 years later, still working on evolving this stuff. And I think that's, a good story to tell. And he's not on YouTube. He's not really on forums. He just kind of does his own thing. He doesn't sell his fish, by the way. The only time I can get fish is if I go visit him. So then you got Les Wilson. This is one of the owners of Cobalt, the brand, and I guess I didn't realize that he has a degree. I think he's an actual ichthyologist, right? Is that what it said? I read somewhere that he was an ichthyologist specializing in fish food, but maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, so lots of people that I don't know well. Chuck Davis, he's a really funny guy, and he does a lot of collecting in Florida. It's cool to see his perspective on the hobby. But what I'm trying to highlight here is it's not just a bunch of other YouTubers. Because I feel like I can't just go, oh, well, let me go watch the video on Carl Trochu. Let me go watch this video. I can't. And so that's where I find there to be extra value. Not that I would never watch a YouTuber and that kind of stuff. It's just I feel like I know for me personally, it's very difficult to give a presentation in person that I haven't already just covered online, and maybe in the in person, it's more one-on-one. How do you connect with people? How do you get their questions answered? If you don't get your question answered in our chats, it's a smaller group. Maybe we got a better chance. So how can we make it where we're doing something that a YouTuber can't already do on YouTube? That's our goal. So at our event, like our Washington event, it's a test pilot of, well, how are we going to make a fun event? How do we make a fun event that isn't just a YouTuber speaking and people listening? Instead, like maybe an auction. We don't do auctions online, right? Maybe we do a Q&A or a panel. That's kind of a little bit different. We do Q&A here, but how do we make that a little bit different, right? That's our goal, is how do we spice things up a little bit. How do you get rid of nematodes? Expel P is probably what I would try. Let me just make sure that I'm under the right. A nematode should be like a planaria, right? Let me make sure. I think it is, yeah. Or at least it's a type, like a ribbon worm. The first thing I would try, because I don't know what type of nematode you have, is Expel P. And we do carry that now. I was told by Randy of like, have you talked about that? And I wasn't sure if I've talked about it yet. So we have Expel P. Expel P is a medication that I asked for years ago, right? And this is what makes manufacturers love and hate me. So I had said, this was probably 2-3 years ago, somewhere in that range, that I think there's a gap in the market for levamisole, right? And if we developed the right treatment procedure and instructions and all of these things, I think it would sell really well. Because right now there's a lot of companies like Select Aquatics stuff, and they can package it out, and everyone's kind of got their own way of doing it. And so Fritz came out with Expel P, and they came out with it really quickly. And I didn't have Camellinus redworm, which is the main thing that we use to treat, or we want to treat with levamisole, right? It also will treat planaria. It also works on some saltwater stuff, which I'm not super well versed in. But so Fritz is, in my opinion, is mostly a saltwater company. They tested it and they got everything going really great with saltwater right out the door, and they launched this product like 2 years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, whatever that is, right? But I couldn't complete my testing, and so me asking them to make this product, they make it, and then I wouldn't sell it until I was able to test it. Well, and I could not really run into Camellinus redworm enough. So Robert finally got some in the store from some guppies. He was able to treat it. In my old fish room, I was having it kill off snails in the dosages I was trying. So Randy was able to treat planaria without losing snails and shrimp and stuff in his fish room. Here, when I got here, we got some redworm. I had Robert order more from the same source so I could do it. I was able to get rid of the redworm. And then I started treating shrimp and snails just with doses to see what it would do, and it wasn't killing them. So now that we have like 3 different independent kind of trials and tests and all of that, I was comfortable with bringing it online because I didn't want one of my fears, we already catch enough flack for kind of prophylactically treating. And I think meds are incredibly complicated for the average hobbyist. I didn't want to throw another med into the mix that didn't have a specific purpose and had been tested, right? And so you can see here, like, Expel P treats parasites such as planaria and nematodes like Camellinus redworms, right? I don't have nearly as much experience with this as I do like Icex and Paraclens and that kind of stuff, because I haven't needed to use it as much. This is kind of a different type of dewormer. I would be using this to try and treat clown loaches with skinny disease or wasting disease. I would try to use it to get rid of Camellinus redworm, planaria outbreaks, basically things that Paraclens wasn't already getting for me. I would then try Expel P. Now, levamisole is pretty good at treating a lot of the other parasites as well, but it really clouds up your water, it goes milky and stuff like that. So it is a good thing to have in your arsenal. But we don't use it as like the trio. We still wait till something was to make it through that line of defense, if you will, and then we would, like puffers will get this, like Ladybird and Murphy, and they'll get levamisole treatments early on in their life to try and make sure that we've really cleaned them out from being wild. But yeah, so we do sell this product. You can see right here that we sell for $12.74. That's the lowest price that we're allowed to sell it at. So no one can sell it cheaper than this. And if they are, let us know, and we'll complain, and they'll have to match. And that is a winning thing even for the hobbyist. So if you find someone selling it cheaper, which I realize is going to sound weird coming out of my mouth, but if we all get into a price war over something like this, what happens is someone like Amazon wins, or someone like I would win, where it's like, okay, well, I'll turn off advertising because I can't make any money on this product, which means less will sell and this and that. So it's kind of like when you go out to eat somewhere, the hope is you have a good meal and a good time. The server made an appropriate wage, the cook made an appropriate wage, the business owner made an appropriate wage, the dishwasher, everyone won, so that it's sustainable and repeatable, and you come back in a month and you have that same great experience again. Whereas if that doesn't work that way and you come back in a month and they've gone out of business, now you have to go somewhere else. And so we want it, so hopefully that no one party is grossly profiting and others aren't. And so in an environment where like the buy price never goes down for me, right? So if we get to the point where it's like, oh, we're selling it for the same price we buy it, then customer service goes down, then other things go down. And so we still want be able to pay for education and all of that. And so that's why I actually think that price wars and not controlling the price a bit is detrimental in the day and age of internet, because we see it all the time. People are pointing out like, oh, people are copying your descriptions and this and that. Like, yes, not everything is equal on the internet. And even though, maybe 60% of the time it works out in your favor, there's still 40% of the time, especially with something like a med, if misinformation happens or you don't understand the information or you don't get a response, like if it's a 5-day response time, then, maybe your fish are going to suffer for it. So we try to invest to make sure that doesn't happen on our end as much as possible. All right. Amazon's business model is to track sales from its affiliate sellers, identify good sales, compete directly at a loss to drive those affiliates out of the business and jack up the prices. Yeah, it's a well-known tactic. That's one of the reasons we don't sell on Amazon in the United States. We do it, like we utilize it to our benefit outside of the United States, but if something goes really well, they just reach out, and most businesses don't say no. I will say one of the companies I know that has said no has been Extreme. They used to sell, when we partnered with them, one of our things was don't sell on Amazon, because Amazon won't adhere to that pricing. And so Amazon for the last, not this last year, but before we started working with them, they were buying product from Extreme and then selling it for less than they bought it for. And the goal was to long-term drive everyone else out of the business and raise the price. Now, that was detrimental to Extreme because they weren't growing, right? So if let's pick a number and say they had 5,000 customers. Over time, those 5,000 customers would just keep funneling to Amazon. But let's say 5 years later, they still only have 5,000 customers. Well, that wasn't enough to pay the employees and make sure they could pay for their house payments and do all of that. Like you have to usually kind of grow to offset inflation and rising costs and products and things like that. And so the other problem is, as those 5,000 customers are relying on Amazon, right? Relying on Amazon. And so therefore, they're not buying from other people. Now Extreme, 98% of their sales are coming from Amazon. Amazon can come back and go, we want a cheaper price. Or if Extreme needs to go, hey, but the cost of shrimp and spirulina and plastic all went up by 30% this year, and Amazon goes, we won't pay a penny more, now they're losing money, right? And so they're not able to diversify, and there's all these things that lots of businesses do all the time. And sometimes you get into it because you need to, like you just need, like, and there's definitely times when other people won't pick you up. Maybe you're brand new and no one wants to, no one wants to bring on your product, and it just happens that way, right? So, there are pros and cons, and you need to, as a business, you evaluate those risks accordingly. Yeah. Why doesn't the co-op sell Community Crave? Because that's a product line I think that shouldn't exist. That's why. Corey always making people angry. Community Crave, if you mix krill and spirulina together, you've made Community Crave. Right? So that's just another third SKU, which to me, that's another spot in the retail store. Well, it's more than one spot because we have to carry it in at least 2 sizes, right? So it's 2 more spots in the retail store. 2 more rack spaces, not only where we're picking them in the warehouse, but then storage of a product, right? And so I also kind of try to put my money where my mouth is and not support products that I think are detrimental to the hobby in general. And not that that product is bad, but like a local fish store, if they just go, well, I'm going to bring on this, and this, it is very hard to keep. It's much harder to keep. Let's say you've got spirulina in 2 sizes, and by the way, they make like 4 or 5 sizes. So you could be carrying spirulina in 5 sizes. You could be carrying krill in 5 sizes, and then you're carrying Crave in 5 sizes. So you've got 15 product SKUs sitting there, where you could accomplish, like that's what we do, we accomplish everything those 15 SKUs accomplish, we accomplish it in 4 SKUs. And to me, that's what helps keep us in business, is we don't have this bloat and this overhead of like, oh yeah, we have a vial that's this big of this food, and we have a giant container of this food. Now, there's going to be people that want that giant container. There's going to be people that, I have one betta and I want to buy it in this little container. We don't grab all of them as a customer, right? But we do focus on going, okay, well, we carry this size, and we'll buy in insane quantities. We want to ship it by the pallet so that we can save money on shipping and save them on shipping and all of that. And we can focus the marketing efforts, right? So instead of going, hey, I have this fish, what should I feed them, right? It's, okay, well, could it be Crave? Sure, it could be. Could it be krill? Yes, it could be. Could it be spirulina? Yes, it could be. Should it be pellets? Yes, it could be. Should it be the wafers? Yes, it could be, right? So we try to narrow it down so that people make easy decisions and don't have decision paralysis. And Community Crave works for a ton of different fish, but not for all the fish, right? And so if you want Community Crave, my advice, mix those two containers and now you've made it, right? We also see differences in, to the best of my knowledge, that's what they're doing, by the way. We see differences in flake size when they combine the two, right? Because you got to mix it up, right? But I wouldn't ever tell anyone to not buy it. I can only explain why we don't carry it. And I do know that a lot of stores look to what we're doing to help guide them a little bit. And we could easily bring that SKU on. It wouldn't put us under anything. But like King Lee at Twin Cities Guppies, a new store, right? That money is so tight. Opening a store is so stressful. The budget is so small. You don't have the customers developed yet, all of this. And so if they just bring on krill, and they just bring on nano, and they just bring on spirulina, and they just bring on the wafers and the shrimp food and one of the cichlid foods already, right? That's probably 14 different SKUs, and they're $1,000 into it, which might not seem like a lot, but that's a lot for a very small startup store. And so if they were to further bring on a lot of the other SKUs, like, floating version of cichlid pellets, sinking version of cichlid pellets, Crave, right? Bringing that in. And then there's, trying to think of other foods from Extreme, like the monster pellets. Like there's a lot of different sizes in all of this. And it can be overwhelming when the reality is, we walked in, I think of it like a restaurant. You walk in, you kind of know what you're going for. Am I looking for a diner? Am I looking for Italian food? Am I looking for Mexican food? So you walk in, and when you see a menu that's like 14 pages, and you're all, you got 4 people there, and you're all going, what are you going to get? Yeah, I don't know. I'm still looking. What are you going to get? And the person, are you guys ready to order? Like, I'm only 7 pages in, not yet. All right. You get to page, you're like, wasn't there some, chimichanga? Was that page 3? No. 7? No. Were the specials? No. Right? Whereas if you kind of boil it down to now you got like 2-ish, like, you notice like the more high-end restaurants you go to, the narrower the menu gets. I personally believe part of that is due to experience of like, look, here's salads, here's burgers, here's chicken products, here's steaks, here's this. You go to Mexican food, you're like, here's the specials, like here's the order by number, here's beef products, here's chicken products, here's seafood products, and you can kind of get through that menu quickly, and you can manage costs. You don't have to worry that you have all of this stuff in stock ready to serve people. Instead, you can narrow it down and just make sure you're doing it efficiently, make sure you're keeping on top of it, make sure you're rotating stock. Like that's another big problem that people don't talk about. If I have 14 different SKUs, right? And let's say, well, I know this to be a fact, but you've got krill, you've got spirulina, you've got Crave. These are essentially the same type of things, right? If we're selling krill at 10 a day, and we're selling Community Crave at 2 a day, and spirulina at 1 a day, right? You're going to run into problems where you need to remember, if you order all these at the same rates, this is going to start staling out, and you have to throw it away because it's going to be too stale, right? And so you run into all of these stock rotation issues and all of this, when meanwhile at a store or even in a warehouse, that costs money to rotate stock. It costs money to keep up on this. One more thing to remember, right? You want it fresh also. So like I ordered something from my own business the other day, and it was Hikari Vibra Bites. And I audited myself, and I looked at when it expired, and it didn't expire till well into 2023. And I was like, that's good, because I definitely have gotten foods before from online or stores where it's like, this expires in 4 months. And I know that when they're manufactured, it's at least 2 years out. And so one of the things we try to do is we try to get closest to the source we can, so it's not like, oh, well, that product sat in the warehouse of this wholesaler for 8 months before we bought it, right? Yeah. So I look at it as like, if we're kind of a steward for hobbyists, we're kind of a steward, and it already sounds super conceited, not that everyone follow us, but I think I gain intel from other businesses too. I'm seeing what they're doing, trying to see what I think is working for them. Trying to figure that out. And so I think people do that with us also. And so I think it's good for the hobby when the end result is fresher. Everyone should be making, being able to hold profits, all those kind of things. All right. Yeah, enough about food and menus and that type of stuff. And I also get, I run into the other thing where you get, where'd I go? Zenzo and I tried to go get lunch one day, and it was like it was Bob's Burgers. Not like the show, but like, I think there's a place, maybe it was Blazing Onion. I don't remember exactly where it was, but we got there, and they had the opposite problem of like, you're only serving like these 7 different like appetizer-y type foods. Like, I literally can't buy a cheeseburger? Like, what is going on here? And sometimes, as I call it, when there's too much fusion, and you're like, all right, here's what we got for you. We have Tex-Mex, Vietnamese, Italian egg rolls. And you're just like, what? Where they've fused way too many things together, and you're like, oh, okay. So it's this, and this, and then you dip it in spaghetti sauce? Like, what have you done? This is just not good. Sometimes it's perfect. There's a perfect fusion. You're like, wow, that's really like good. And then there's just like, you're just trying to one up the next guy where it's like, this is 7 different cultures into one egg roll. Like, this is just not right. So, any plans for an event in Arizona? Depends if I'm going to melt down to the ground or not in Arizona. It's so hot there. I envision there'll probably be an event there at some point. Yeah, it's close enough. We used to have a Tex-Mex Chinese buffet place. It was confusing, but not terrible. Yeah, that's, there definitely things can work, and I'm not saying that no one should ever experiment, but it does get crazy sometimes where it's like, you don't make, like a basic thing. Like, and that's the thing, like a Bob's Burgers or a Blazing Onion, they're known for like, you go get a cheeseburger, maybe feeling a little crazy, you get the Cobb salad, right? Like, you kind of know what's already going to be there, and to walk in and be like, oh, you guys have changed, so you only have things that don't go together. You're like, huh, you got spaghetti milkshakes, you've got, clam chowder pizza, and, the special of the day is, bacon wrapped corn dog sticks. It's like, you guys are really reaching. Like, how about, you get back to some of these basics here. And then on top of all that, we actually went there, and it was because, they had a sign that says, because of COVID, we don't have enough staff, there's no indoor dining, it's takeout only. And the prices were insane, by the way. So that's the part I forgot to mention is like, not only is it like, oh, it's a spaghetti milkshake, you're like, $12.99 for a milkshake? Like, good Lord, this is crazy. And so it would have been crazy expensive. And we were just trying to have a business meeting where we eat and talk before we go to the next thing we were going to do. And so it didn't work out on like so many levels. But yes, that's obviously the opposite of 14 different SKUs, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. All right. I own a deli and we make Reuben egg rolls sometimes. That could be all right. Do you dip it in Thousand Island dressing? I mean, to be fair, you can deep fry almost everything, and it's pretty good. So there is that. When are our new nets coming out? It should be this month. I don't have tracking on the cargo container right now. It could land while we're in Peru or right after, something like that. It all depends on, with all the world weather events and all that, stuff gets jumbled up, and so something that could have been like, it'll be here tomorrow, is now 4 weeks out. But it should be soonish. Freshwater eels, have I ever kept or bred them? I've never bred them. I've got a pair of tire track eels getting it on tonight, huh? Everything I've read says they don't breed in captivity. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you could be misinterpreting behavior. Could also be that they're just, like bichers are very hard to raise up the fry. They do breed in captivity, but a lot of people say they don't. It also could be that, maybe most people don't have your tank size. I mean, I don't know your whole situation there, but it'd be very cool if you did. And if it does happen, you could try and impart some of your wisdom with other people. Like, here's my experience. Even just a forum post somewhere, someone who's got that experience just like you would love to find it today. But I haven't bred any eels. No, I've only kept them and enjoyed them, but never made any efforts to breed them. Also, I would have said they're pretty difficult to breed from what I hear. But there's a big difference between repeating information I've heard and relaying information I've experienced. And I have not experienced trying to breed them, so I'm relaying information from other people, just like you were reading. What am I looking to bring back from Peru? Nothing. I want to bring back nothing. Some of the fish that we're trying to, I guess, capture. And by capture, I mean not actually collect, but like capture as in video. I gave him a list of neon tetras, juraparis, and Amazon puffers. Now, there's lots of stuff out there, and there's still be like, I'd love to see a giant stingray in person in captivity, or not in captivity. A Texas shovel nose, like or just like a shovel nose in general. There's so many things that would be very cool, but when I'm thinking about, this GoPro, like right here, like what do I want to get on this GoPro underwater or something? Or there's like a bunch of equipment over here that you can't see off screen. I really would like to see, I think it'd be beneficial to see neon tetras in the wild, Amazon puffers in the wild, and juraparis. Now, if we can find true juraparis, and they seem to be abundant and all of that, I would be very tempted to bring some juraparis, quarantine them, and then put them in the 800 gallon. Because that's what I have with Murphy. I love that combo. And I just would enjoy seeing them for myself. And that's my main goal here is, at this point, we're $20,000 into a trip like this. And what would I love to be able to pull out of it? It's not neon tetras, juraparis, and Amazon puffers, because a couple $100 and I could have those, right? Even all wild caught. Really, I'm trying to spend that on what is it that I don't know exists and I want to film? What is it that I'm going to learn that I don't know that I'm going to learn? Like, corridors on substrate and stuff from the past. One thing I'm trying to remember, I want to take my thermometer I use in my fish room right now, and I think I could focus a lot more on teaching myself and you guys about water temperatures. I think that could be very useful in knowing, well, how hot or cold is it here at this spot? So let's say we actually go and we find neon tetras. We can at least say, all right, in this environment, at this time of the year, on this day, it was this temperature, right? Because, let me see, Iquitos weather. Yeah, so if we go here, go to the website, boom. So Iquitos, which I spelled incorrectly, FYI, the temperatures that we're looking at, reasonably, is highs in the 80s to maybe 90s, and then lows like 68, 69, right? And so what does that actually mean on water temperature? And when you look at, year-round things, right? So if we're thinking about neon tetras, we're thinking about juraparis and those things we want to go see in nature. Let's see if this will have a. Let's see, is this year-round? Yeah, so year-round, this is obviously averages of temperatures, not, different days can drop down quite a bit, but, it looks like low 70s. And some of you, out of the 1,000 people probably hanging out, might be thinking, wait, sometimes Corey says he keeps his fish room in the low 70s. This is how I kind of arrive at this number of like, well, if water, or not water temp, but if air temp is low 70s and that kind of stuff for most of the year, where a lot of the fish I'm keeping are from, not all by any means, but just a lot of the places I keep fish from, it seems to me like I could let that happen in my fish room. And so knowing that 71, right, 71 air temp, water temp probably is lower, right? And it's not like they all just died off in July, right? You can kind of see average hourly temperatures here. What is this? This is cloud covers, chance of precipitation, average monthly rainfall. I know that if you dig in though, a lot of times you can find water temperatures. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Let's see, year-round weather spark. I know you can dig in enough and you can find water temps. Let's see. Max, average, hours of sunshine. Nope, they don't have sea temperature because they're... But when you find that, a lot of times you'll find like, oh, what do you mean in this month it drops down to 65 or 68? And then the other thing is too, part of it is, I think we think of, if my fish hit 65, it's a death sentence. We ship fish all around the country or world, and that doesn't happen. And then I still remember, so, was it the last trip? 2 trips ago? 2 trips ago, I think. Yeah, the first trip I took. One night, it was freezing cold. Water was coming in the window because the windows don't have glass. It just had screens because it's usually warm. I was getting rained on in the bed and all that. It was cold. And it was down in the 50s. Now, that doesn't cause the water to instantly like, oh, it's that cold, but that went on for a few days. And so I know there are these lulls in temperature, and the fish, it's not like it's, oh, we lost that species. They're adapted because they've been doing that for thousands of years, right? And so, yeah, that evolves my fish keeping. So that's the kind of stuff I'm trying to learn and film and document for this amount of money, because it's not necessarily about the fish for me. I want to see them and all of that, but yeah. See if you can find any snails in the Corydorus habitat. I haven't, so you don't upset Dean, but it was very hard to find snails. We did find some mystery snails. I don't, in my mind, I can't remember, like, were they actually at the spots where Corydors were? Like, I knew were tetra, like black neon tetras, they were there. I remember that, but I don't 100% remember if they were where Corydors were. But surprisingly, very few snails in comparison to fish and that kind of stuff. Like, it was, you might find, like, look at this, Apista number 40, and then, you're like, wow, the first snail. Like, it was, and they don't even like run from you. They're just that not apparent there. So it was interesting to see, and so it was also interesting to see that, hear from like the guides and that kind of stuff, that they've never seen snails near the Amazon puffers, which that's like, what? What are they eating then? What are they doing? How are they making that work? So that's the kind of stuff I want to learn. I'm like, well, how are they making that work? Does Dean plan to take fish home? I don't think he's got a specific fish, but the way it works right now, I believe, is that we kind of bought this all-inclusive package, and everyone is allowed to take like a box of fish home, like shipped home. So that's included in this price, right? But that's not the biggest thing is finding appropriate homes and trying to breed them and do all these things with them. And so I know one of the fish that Dean wanted to collect was red pencil fish, but they're the opposite of where those other fish we wanted to see are. And so, does he get them from a wholesaler? Do we actually find something? And I'm still looking for, what are we going to find that we didn't know we were looking for? What looks 10 times better in the wild than it did in a picture? Or like the tetras that Dean has with lungfish, or his lungfish. He never thought he was going to bring home a lungfish. So I think that's part of this is super neat. It'd be a cool story. I'd like to keep this fish for a long time. That experience, I think, is worth something. But yeah, I don't think anyone's really going there with, we've got to find and take home these fish. Any word on the mystery fish that's going into a tank that you and Dean set up in the video? Still working on it. I put some decor in, and I've got some more filming to do. I've just been buried. In fact, the next month of videos basically will be at the helm of Jimmy. I messaged him a few days ago. Dean and I were filming some stuff, but we were just slammed with his Peru and that kind of stuff. But I basically told him, for the month of August, operate as if I am just out of touch. Because I know that I got to go to Peru for a couple weeks, and then I get back, and the world's usually on fire of like, this is going wrong, this needs a decision, this event needs this decision, this. And so I'm at least out for another week. And then maybe I'm like, okay, we're back, and I could be filming again. So we might be able to get, some of the Peru footage going, but I don't want to rush any of that. So I told Jimmy, you're a master at your craft. You've been a YouTuber. We've got lots of assets around us, lots of great employees, lots of great fish rooms. We've got the store. We've got all that stuff, right? And so go make 4 videos you think people want to see. It'll be a nice change up, give everyone a nice break, from what I normally do. And then, whether he's in the video himself or filming someone else, that's up to his artistic ability there. And it'll give me a little bit of a breather so I can come back. We can do justice to hopefully the Peru footage and start kind of winding up I've got some footage, but I also don't want to just hit back and be like, I got to film today because we got nothing ready to go. So I've got some stuff afterwards. Yeah, and I also think he's gonna enjoy it. I think Jimmy is, he's gonna be scared because it's a very daunting thing to get comments from thousands and thousands of people, right? Both good and bad, and I thought they were going to love this, they didn't, whatever that looks like, right? But at the same time, he gets to now direct the show. Instead of, we're going to do this, he gets to go, I get this idea. And I know there's a lot of people that are antsy about it, but I wouldn't have handed it off to him if I didn't think he could handle it. Jimmy livestream, sure, if he wants to. It's kind of take over the channel for a month, maybe there's a member-only video. Who knows what he's going to do, right? He's got obviously a big workload because now he has to film and record it and do all of that, but I think it's going to be fun. And those are videos I might actually watch because I proof my own videos, but I don't watch them. So I'm hoping that, oh wow, I get to watch, something he does that I don't see, then like, oh, I'll enjoy it too. Where'd that question go? Oh, do you still get excited to tell Dorky about your daily antics while away if she's not able to attend? No. Because I'm trying to unplug so hard from the real world that there's not too many things. There's a lot of, I was puking and doing this today and it sucked and that was bad. And then there's like this, but there was this really cool thing that happened. And that usually gets shared out on like Instagram or YouTube members, community page, because it's to upload one picture might take 42 minutes if there's a signal, right? So it's like, and usually, you can text a little bit, but there's, caps to the data and all that. And so I'm trying not to run into that kind of stuff. And, but yeah, mostly it's kind of just like, yeah, things are going pretty good, still safe, knock on wood, didn't have anything go horrible today. I miss you. How are the dogs doing? Is there anything I need to know at home? One time I had to sign a power of attorney for a cargo container while on the top of a boat on the Amazon River. Because if it didn't happen, fines were accumulating and that kind of stuff. So there's half of it is she's checking in to make sure that I didn't get eaten by an anaconda, and then I'm checking in to make sure that the business isn't on fire in some way. And so both of those anxieties are relieved. Like, okay, with that, knowing that now, how's it been going with the dogs? How are you doing? Oh yeah, I miss you too. That's mostly what it is, and not so much like, corridors are on sharp substrate, can you believe it? It's mostly, yeah, I'm having a good time. And I miss, a lot of times like, oh, can't wait till you make tacos or, some kind of food or whatever that's going to be. How do I feel about the disappearance of all the mom and pop shops? I don't think that's a true thing. I think it's moving. Like, there's a store in, we haven't lost any really in the Washington area. We've had a new one open up down in Oregon. I think there's definitely going to be like, oh, it's drying up over here, but then there's people opening up over there. I don't think there's been a huge disappearance, if you will. For everyone I talked to, aquatics did amazing during COVID. People are expanding, all of that. I think we could see it if the economy crashes. But in general, this is a hobby that can be done very cheaply if it needs to be. It's a hobby you don't have to travel to do. It keeps your mind busy. I think there's a lot of pluses to it. I think, most times I tell people it's kind of hard to fail at a fish store if you're really trying your hardest and you understand some of the principles that, clean bathrooms, tidy tanks, no disease, customers, comes first. Think like, what's the customer going to want to see? Try and do everything you can the best you can. Work a million hours. It's hard to go out of business doing that. It's also very hard to sustain that long term. So usually where I see people going out of business, they were able to do that for a while. They can't sustain that. They never develop the skills to hire people or find the right people. And so they kind of go down in this lull, and then they sit down at that lull area and struggle. That doesn't cover everyone. That's a broad generalization. There could be economic factors. It could be, it could be wrong time, wrong place, could be disruption. There's a million things that could happen. But of the things you can control, making sure you're, dotting your P's and crossing your Q's will get you there. There has been expansion in my area. 6 open in the last 5 years, all still open. Yeah, and from statistics in general, the hobby is getting bigger. That's a good thing. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to go open up a store in Antarctica, right? There's still decision making, and there's still, will it actually support this, and does it make sense, and the way I need to run my store is different than someone in California, in Texas, in New York, in Alabama. All those are going to be different, right? Aquarium Gardens in Federal Way went out of business. I mean, that guy has gone out of business like 3 times. The rumors are he was in the mafia. He got busted for illegal fish. There was the tax implications when he was running out of White Center and was running the grow shop and not reporting taxes. So in my opinion, personally, right, that business didn't fail from not working as a business. It failed because they were doing illegal things, right? And there's, I happen to know a lot on the back end on a lot of these businesses just because I work with a lot of these people. And so, but of the stores that are doing, they've made aquatics their primary source of business, and they're doing things legally, and they actually care, that's where I would say I'm not seeing them go out of business, right? And so, I know, this is very local, obviously, but Midway Pets, I know Alex, and I know the owners, and we're plugged into a lot of these things, and you're just like, that is a terrible decision you guys are making, but you're going with it, and I hope the best for you. You don't tell them that, but you see these things going, what was another one? Another one was King's Discus, right? They moved out of their retail store into a garage in a neighborhood. I don't think anyone's really shocked. You're like, oh, that didn't work out? That wasn't a great decision? Right? We've got another one that was Aquaria, which was in Bellevue, and it was a very high-end ADA, very small store. You may have seen it like on Coralfish 12G's channel, I think on Dustin's Fish Tanks channel, that kind of stuff, and it was very high-end small tanks. And she had a health problem, and that's why she's closing down. But I don't say like all the mom and pop stores are closing down, the world's coming to an end. Like, no, those are things that happen. You know, if I get a horrible disease tomorrow, knock on wood, and we have to close, that's not because the hobby is dying. That's because I didn't have enough infrastructure in place to keep us going. So there's always going to be ebbs and flows, right? But there's also stores that people will say like, oh, that store, you know, that's a good store. It's like, that wasn't really a store. That was like a hobbyist, you know, trying to make things work. All right. Unfortunately, I'm just across the border in British Columbia, and we just had our local store closed down a little while ago. Good stores are at least an hour away to drive, sometimes longer. Sure. I mean, I think the bigger picture here is, like, I could close the retail store down tomorrow, and we're still a successful company. Like, it wouldn't even be a bad decision to close the store down. We do it because we want to build community and we want to support people, and we've got employees there. But we could, you know, bring them all to the wholesale side, and arguably it'd be a better decision than having the retail store open. But does that fall under Corey wants to make more profits? Or does that fall under mom and pop stores are closing everywhere, they can't make it? That would fall under Corey wants to make more profit, and not, you know, they're actually struggling, you know. I do think you should support them. I do encourage you guys to go buy from them. But, you know, time and time again, you'll see the threads pop up on forums and Facebook groups and all of that, and you see the, you know, this store's conditions are terrible, and this, you know, they're not treating me correctly, and they have no public bathroom, and they have all these things going wrong. There for sure are going to be people that go out of business that just don't have the business portion of it too. But then they're legitimately, you know, a lot of the stores that have closed down in Washington, you know, people went to jail for selling illegal arowanas and things like that. And there were people that just got big fines, right? And other illegal things. Like, it just so happens that aquatics and fish stores are one of the easiest places to possibly launder money. You know, how does an accountant or, you know, a forensic accountant know a shipment coming from another country with 5,000 Oscars only had 4,000 Oscars in it, right? Or only had 1,000 Oscars in it. And then you claim 4,000 of them died. Or vice versa, right? 5,000 Oscars do come over. You claim 4,000 of them die. You only are paying, you know, the taxes and all of that kind of stuff for the 1,000. Meanwhile, you sold 5,000. You know, there's a lot of fish stores which we don't even take cash. That's one more reason to, you know, not take cash. But a lot of fish stores like, well, if you pay in cash, there's no tax, there's no this, and there's no that. That's all fine and good until you are making so much money that someone figures out what you're doing, and now you've got tax implications. We've watched a lot of successful stores be successful and then just die to the tax burden of like, well, I didn't know it was going to cost so this much. Yep, a lot of things to manage. Any good fish stores in Marysville, Washington? Not that I mean, I think there's Petco's and PetSmarts, but no mom and pop type. Yeah. Let's see. What do I suggest for those interested in starting a store correctly? Go manage someone else's store. 100%. You're going to learn so much. You're going to learn HR issues, payroll issues. You're going to learn wholesalers, who has good fish, who doesn't have good fish. Who delivers on time, who doesn't deliver on time, how to handle customer service, how to farm reviews for, you know, how, like, for Yelp and Better Business Bureau and Google and Facebook and this and that. There's so many things when people think like, no, what you need to be doing is selling good fish. Like, yes, that is very important, but it's all the other things that take people down. They don't realize, well, I didn't know how I was supposed to be paying myself. I didn't know how I was supposed to be documenting purchases. I didn't know that equipment over $2,000 has to be depreciated. I didn't know. There's so many things you don't know, and you gotta learn. And you can learn and get paid to learn by managing someone else's business for a couple years, right? And so that would be my biggest advice, honestly, is, and you'll see that happen a lot when someone's gonna buy like a Subway franchise or a McDonald's franchise. A lot of times it's in the paperwork. You literally have to go and work for one for like a year before you're allowed to buy one. So you don't just hit the ground, you're like, what do I do now? Like you're actually built into the process, you know how everything works, you know how it should be working, you've seen a working version of that. It's much easier to replicate once you've seen it done and you've worked on it than I'm gonna reinvent the whole wheel here. Now that doesn't mean there aren't things you can change. You can also learn what's bad. You know, you learn things like once every 14 days, a customer takes a dump on the floor. Those are things you don't think about when you've never owned or worked in retail. You don't think about, all right, well, how do I tackle that? What is the proper safety equipment that my employees would need to deal with that? No one's going to want to deal with that. How do we make sure it's fair? How do we make sure they're safe? How do we make that happen less, right? Just stuff like that. You know, there's just stuff like that where you're just like, I'd never thought about, I thought about fish poop all day long. Never thought about human poop, right? So there's reasons why, restrooms aren't open to the public and things like that. And yeah, there's do I have another local acrylic tank manufacturer recommendation? We couldn't reach Jason. I don't have another. I've only ever used them. I would say keep trying. Maybe it's the summer. Did you try on their Facebook? I feel like I saw. I feel like I saw stuff on his Facebook, like he's making more stuff. So, and so Jason would be a great example of a business that if he went out of business, I would not be shocked. He has a full-time, well, I don't know if it's full-time, but he has another job. I believe he's a nurse by day, I think. Something in medical. Because he gets great health insurance and all that and dependability and all that. But he's not a social media wizard, right? He's got things that don't make sense to me, like half his stuff is branded Clear Fabricators Incorporated, half his stuff is branded World Class Aquariums. That's my number one pet peeve of like, just because you got a good.com, like just because I could buy like the best aquariums.com or, the best education on aquariums.com doesn't make it a good idea to be like, but we're aquariumcoop.com. So there's things like that. But because he's burning the candle at both ends, it makes it hard for customer service aspect and writing the quotes out and doing all that. And so you kind of got to chase him down. And a lot of times that's going to lead to, 80% of people who want to talk about to a tank builder will never build an aquarium. That's why we stopped. We used to be the middleman for that. And it was just a giant waste of time for us. But there's 20% of people that they do get that quote and they're like, that aquarium's $3,000. They're like, great, can you start tomorrow? But most people going, well, what could you quote out these 10 different aquariums? I know it's going to take you 4 hours of actual work to build a real quote that only lasts for a week because acrylic's going to change in price. So my guess is you just have to kind of keep trying to get a hold of that guy, which is not optimal business by any means at all, Christine. I fully sympathize there. And once you do, though, kind of also let them know like your seriousness scale, right? Yeah. So, and that might help move it forward of like, okay, this person, like if they're really busy, they're not going to want to do, a bunch of quotes. But if they know like this person's ready to buy, they're much more likely. And then also, you might give them a budget of like, hey, I'm looking to spend $1,500 because tanks, no matter what size, are expensive. Whether the sides, like gluing a joint together, it's kind of the same whether it's this long or this long. The acrylic costs a lot different. But yes, so there are things like that where if he was to go out of business, and when I say go out, leave the business, however he exits that business, it could be purely it's more beneficial to do his day job. Could be that, it could be right now, and I just got a quote from a different manufacturer, it's not local, and the lead time on acrylic is stupid long. Like, that acrylic has to come from somewhere. And so it could be like, maybe he can't buy any acrylic. So maybe he's not answering. I don't know. I don't know what the situation is, but I also don't have another local manufacturer for you, unfortunately. So I would say keep trying a little bit, which is not a great thing. So you might be like, I've tried 26 times. Oof. But look up Clear Fabricators Incorporated, world-class aquariums. His name is Jason Gregory. That might help you a little bit too. Because I do believe he probably wants to build you a tank, but there could just be a disconnect somewhere in that pipeline. All right. Anyone have recommendations for a 3D background? I'm not psyched about dealing with universal rocks. You and me both, buddy. I don't know. I haven't found a good one yet. Like, I tried the one up in Canada, and they were just making things way too difficult, so that wasn't great. I don't have a good source for you. I would tell you 100% if there was like. So I used to like working with. It was down in Oregon. What were they called? Nature's by Design. Design by Nature? That was another URL name that drove me nuts. Designs by Nature, is that what they were? Let's see. Nope, that's Native Plants of Michigan. That ain't it. Nope, that's garden stuff. Nature by Design. That? Nope. Every time I ever wanted to look them up, it was way too hard. That's what I know. Yeah, I don't know if they're still around, but I think there is an opportunity for a company to open up in that space. But the biggest obstacle is shipping, and very much so, it's a chicken and the egg thing of like even if we want to ship wholesale, we need to ship pallets, and we get no breaks on pallets. And so right now, shipping a pallet might be $800, where when Hikari does it might be $200. And so when they quote to send you this background, it's $800 shipping. All of a sudden, you're not buying an $800 background and $800 shipping. But if it was $800 and $200 shipping, you might have pulled the trigger. Well, they can't get to that level until people were buying at $1,600. And so it's a very hard industry that could be to break into for that reason, I think. Let's see here. Oh, I should mention, I want to mention, thank you to all the new members and the super stickers and things like that. I know I tend to gloss over them, and it's not gloss. I try not to make the stream about that. I'm trying to much more just make it, we're a hangout, and you hang out with me if you want to hang out. It is my job, because this will be the last time I can say it, is we do have the next club talk coming up. Let me plug that real quick. So on the 21st is Corridor's Venom, right? And he just got back from Peru doing some more research, and so hopefully we'll find the latest and greatest of what he's got to say. So there's that talk coming up on the 21st. It's always the third Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Oh, here we go. Here's a store event. Looks like Zenzo has been working while we've been working here, and so now these are on the calendar. And so this is gonna be where you find all the events, where we'll be in person, online, and just seeing this right now, it already puts me back into work mode of like, oh yeah. So we clearly need like a little badge or something that would say like online members only, whereas like this anyone can come to. Right? Same with this one. And this is we're attending an event, but we're not putting it on. So like already my worker brain goes, oh, we need to get some delineations going here. What's the best way to handle this so people aren't confused? If 1,000 people look at this, would they assume that we're putting on the event for this? Would they not? Do they know what capacity we're going to be in? Like here, we're actually going to be, we're not speaking. We're going to split or be in the booth, like the Extreme booth. We're hoping they're getting a booth. We're going to be in their booth. So that allows me to go see some of the speakers. So if you come, realize that I'm there to consume as well. I plan to go collect fish. I plan to film. I plan to do these other things. I plan to sit in talks. I want to go learn from Carl and other people there too. So if you come by the booth and Corey's not there, know that I'm probably consuming of like, he's in that talk right now. He's out to lunch. I am definitely going to put time in. You can hang out. We can all go to lunch together. Whatever that looks like, you can sit in on a talk. Obviously, I'm not going to talk to you while we're watching a presentation, but I want to make sure we set expectations realistically between all of these events, all the things we'll be at, and hopefully what you guys will enjoy out of it and give you the experiences, and not just, I don't want it to be like, you should just go. I might be there. Like, we jump in with both feet. We're trying to develop some swag and stuff. It won't be for these first coming events, but maybe some, you can only get this if you go to one of these events, that type of stuff. It'll be fun. Yeah. All right. Well, that's, I guess, 2 hours. I've got some stuff to drive from Amazon that I need to charge up and get ready for Peru and make sure it fits, and stuff like I get to try on underwear, make sure it's quick drying enough and it's gonna work with the other clothing, and all these things you don't use on a daily basis that that I don't want to pack 20 pairs of underwear, but also you kind of want to wear some underwear while you're in the water, and it's another layer of protection. So Aqua Decor is terrible. Yeah, I haven't actually used any of their products, but it seemed like a nightmare to even start the talking journey of like, how do we order? How do we make things happen? And it was just, it's a non-starter. So, yeah, I think a lot of those companies are trying to do it all. And instead, like if I was going to start that company, which I don't plan to, but I would focus on like, okay, what are like, let's nail like 10 gallon, 20 high, 40 breeder, 55, and 75. And just like mass produce those and not have 72 variants, instead have like 2, right? So instead of like, if you look at those sites, like the different amount of products they might have 400. And then like lead times are long and all these problems where it's like, okay, well, if you had, 5 different tanks, 2 different options, that's only 10 SKUs. And then add the 125. Boom. There's, then, okay, now you're up to 12. And just keep hitting normal sizes, and then just make people cut to fit if they don't want that. So if you have, 120, let's say, you might have to buy the 180 gallon background and cut 2 feet off. 120 being 4 feet by 2 feet, a 180 being 6 foot by 2 feet. Instead of carrying every different size, like it doesn't always make sense to have that mold and that product SKU and this. And there's, I'm not afraid to leave people on the table. Why don't you guys sell dry furts? Why don't you sell CO2 regulators? Why don't you do this super high-end lighting? Why don't you do that? Because we can't do it all. There's already, I don't have enough time in my day, so there's no way I can put the same level of attention to these things and expand what we're doing. So instead, we keep our product narrow. We keep our focus narrow, and that helps us make decisions. Does this help someone who's new to the hobby getting into plants? Yes or no? If yes, we move forward. If no, we don't, right? And I think you guys see that from club stuff, community stuff, product stuff. We try to design things and move us towards beginners. And there's people like, it's getting stale. I already know all this. Like, great, you can move on. Like, maybe we're the best T-ball teachers in the world. We know that we're not going to be your teacher for the rest of your life. We just want to do that one thing really well. And so we definitely know that people will move on eventually, and you've seen a little bit of branching out of like the super duper novice doesn't need to know about Corydora's venom, right? But we're also, it is applicable in that you will read things about that, and it's a very slow thing that we could also take away at any point. At any point we could go, you know what? This wasn't working out. Sorry guys, speakers doesn't work out, blah, blah, blah. whatever. We'd finish up where we were. You guys would cancel your memberships, and we'd move on, right? But we don't, we don't make a radical decision to change things. So, what's that new store in Oregon? I believe it's called Pisces. I think. It always makes me think of Pisces Energetics, but I think it's just Pisces. I believe. I can't remember their names, but is it Aubrey and someone? I don't know. Corvus Oskin, I think might even be down there this weekend filming, or maybe not. But he's going to be doing, yeah. All right. I like Spike. Hit that like button on the way out. I'll see you guys live. Maybe if we have rad internet at a hotel, maybe we'll do something fun. I don't expect rad internet at these hotels because they haven't been in the past. We've stayed there before. But hopefully I don't come back sick and I can kind of get right back on the horse. And yeah, when we submit questions for our speakers, usually Zenzo will reach out on the community page and ask if we need that. I don't know. I haven't had a meeting with him about it. Like, was that worth it? Wasn't it worth it? How'd it go? And what I mean by that is, you guys might be like, it's amazing, but what if we find out from the speaker, like, that was a train wreck, don't ever do that again. And then we do it again, and that speaker says that too. Like, oh, there's always, right now, there's three sides to everything of like, how'd we handle it? How'd they handle it? How'd the fans handle it? If all those were good, we keep doing it. If it's all bad, we don't do it. Can we change something? So yeah, he's a contact point on a lot of that stuff. And yeah, thanks for continuing to support us. Hopefully we'll get something cool out of Peru that will be worth sharing video-wise. I mean, there'll be laughs to be shown no matter what, and me being stuck in mud, but hopefully there'll be something actually like, ooh, look at that. I didn't know that. And that's our goal. So, all right, everyone, thanks for showing up. Thanks for hanging out. Let me find where I end this thing. And yeah, I gotta play with batteries and SD cards and power packs and all of that today. Woo, fun. Packing. I've got a waterproof backpack. Waterproof. Not just water resistant, which it's pretty hard to find a waterproof backpack, by the way. It is kind of a crazy contraption, but I wanted to really get some more gear really into that kind of water and go some places that in the past you're like, I don't know if we can get there without damaging the gear. So hopefully we won't have that problem this time. All right. See you guys around.